Myers Tiki Tours, and we'll tell you about the rest of our sponsors as the show goes on, including Jay Allen and Kylie Morgan are you can sit anywhere, Jim, or I don't know what she's doing over there, are coming to the Shuckers at the cottage, and we'll tell you about that in a little bit. And I've been doing this now this is our 97th episode, Jim Atterholt, and that was probably the most intense exchange that we've had so far.
That's a very complicated issue. I wasn't able to hear the actual interview, but I've watched this issue very closely, and it's very complicated.
So speaking of that, Jim Atterholt is with us now, and Jim is running for Fort Myers Beach Town Council. It's his second appearance on the show. You were on the LPA. Let's get right into it. Well, you were on the LPA when this issue came up, and you voted, I believe, yes, because it was 7-0. Why'd you vote yes? Why?
Well, to be honest with you, we listened to this for about 4 hours. We went out and did a site visit and saw the property, saw the issue. I read all the materials on it, and after listening to it for 4 hours, we heard from the council for the applicant for the boardwalk, but we never heard from the town council, and we never heard from the council from the Audubon Society. So, as somebody who is watching this, my wife and I live on the critical wildlife area. We live right next to it, care deeply about it. We walk and run, very active and very engaged in the critical wildlife area. So I'm very sensitive to how it's impacted. And so I understand both sides of this issue. But what I heard, Ed, in that 4 hours of testimony, I've since watched the council hearings on it, I understand both sides. The folks that are trying to do this boardwalk have top-notch counsel, and they've studied this issue. They've fought at the state level. They've been successful at the state level, and I'm concerned if this thing continues to be adversarial in the courts. There was some intimation that the critical wildlife area, how it was formed, might have been problematic. That's what these folks are saying, and I would hate to see in court somehow the underlying formation of the critical wildlife area be jeopardized through tough litigation, adversarial litigation on both sides. So if there's some way we can work this out without potentially risking the existence of the critical wildlife area as an entity, as a legal entity, I think we ought to take a look at it. I think anything we can do to keep this thing from going to the courts, I think it's worth the time and effort on both sides.
So knowing what you know now, would you vote yes again?
I would vote yes, only in the sense that we could prevent this thing from going to the courts. Because if it goes to the courts, I think it's going to be a no holds barred fight, and there's potential to risk the actual existence of the critical wildlife area, and that has me concerned.
If you were on the council voting at the rehearing in a couple of weeks, would you vote yes or no?
Well, the premise of the rehearing is that new information will be presented. I'm not privy to what that is, so I'm interested to hear what that new information will be. So I can't say based upon information I've not seen yet, but my position is still the same. I think we need to be really careful with this thing, because if it goes to the courts, I'd hate to see the actual critical wildlife area, its overall foundational documents, be challenged in a way that puts it at risk.
So birds aside and critical wildlife aside, should there be a boardwalk in that area?
Well, you can't put it aside, because this whole piece is a massive piece of litigation, and they've got top-notch attorneys. They're determined to go to the bitter end. I don't think they want to jeopardize the critical wildlife area. I think they just want their boardwalk, and I just want to be smart as from the LPA's perspective and the town's perspective, how we approach this thing, because sometimes when you do a little thing to protect the environment, you could put the broader critical wildlife area at risk. And I don't know enough about the litigation dynamics, and I think that's a challenge for our town council to talk about that at the rehearing, as to how much risk is there for the town for this critical wildlife area to be jeopardized.
And I've never seen the council so far, this council, as divided as it was on this one issue.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because there's other people are concerned about it setting precedents. Some people are concerned about just the broader issue. Some people are concerned about the specific boardwalk. I think they're all the positions are real and they're relevant, and I think they're legitimate. I'm concerned about there's been intimation that if this thing gets bloody, that overall critical wildlife area could be at stake, and I don't think I'm not sure it's worth the risk, and I think we need to try to work it out.
Okay, so back to the top. Who is Jim Atterholt?
Jim Atterholt is a guy who grew up in Wisconsin, went to school at the University of Wisconsin, married my college sweetheart. We went out to D.C. to save the world. I was a young, idealistic political science major. I worked on Capitol Hill, became chief of staff for a member of Congress out in Washington, D.C. My wife was a Russian linguist for the National Security Agency. We had the quintessential D.C. experience, but we wanted to start a family. Decided to move back to Indiana to do that. Got involved in politics at the local level and state level. Ran for the Indiana General Assembly as a state legislator. Was elected, served 2 terms in the General Assembly. Learned a lot in that experience. Then went and worked for a few years in the private sector with AT&T. Then was called by my governor at the time to be state insurance commissioner, which I did for 4 years. Learned a great deal during that experience, not only about insurance, but about running an agency and managing folks. And then was asked by the governor to serve as the chairman of the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission. We regulate all the gas, electric, and water companies for the state. That was a fascinating experience. Then my last few years with the state, I was asked by the governor to be the chief of staff in the governor's office, which I did. Again, another fascinating learning opportunity and an opportunity to serve in a different capacity, which I enjoyed very much. And then after that was done, my wife had a chance to transfer her job. She's a nurse. I went back to school to become a nurse and had transferred her job down to Fort Myers Beach where she could work from home, started a little consulting business, and we're down here living in paradise.
So you were on the LPA for how long?
For about a year. I've been on for about a year and a half. Okay.
And why did you decide that you wanted to run for town council?
Well, public service to me is something that's just inculcated into my system. And to me, it's a calling. Some people say it's a disease. When I came down here, I thought I would take a break. But when that opportunity to be involved in the LPA came along, it sort of, again, just drew me closer back to public service again. It's a fascinating way to learn about the island and contribute to the community and to the council. And then when there were 3 openings on the council, I looked at my experience and I thought, is there anything I can offer the town based upon my experience? I'm not running against anybody. I'm not mad at anybody. I've got no hidden agenda. I just thought if there's a way I can contribute, I need to step forward.
Okay, so some of the big issues are the lights on Estero Boulevard. What's your position on how that gets resolved?
Well, the lights, I think, have put the council in a tough spot. The county has sponsored a study that I think has kind of done a disservice to the council because it's sort of a Hobson's choice. It's sort of all or nothing. It's either take our white lights or nothing. And I don't think that's really fair to the council. I don't think it's fair to the town. I think, again, obviously public safety is number one. You driving along Estero Boulevard at night is really dangerous and it's scary. Not only as a driver, but also as a pedestrian. We need to do something. We need to do it quickly. But at the same time, we can't have a solution that doesn't comply with state law and is not. We want to be sensitive to the marine life and the turtles, etc. And I've not been convinced that we can't do both. I think there's some options out there we've not considered. When I was head of the Utility Commission, it's amazing to see the advancement in solar street lamps. There's actually wind-powered street lamps. There's ways we can do this with amber lighting that might work, and I think the town has gone back to and encouraged the county to take a deeper look at this. And I think we'll come back, hopefully, at the next council meeting with some additional information that will allow us to make a more informed choice. I don't think it's an either-or scenario, and I think with some more discussion with the county, we'll be able to hopefully come to a consensus where we try to do a little bit of both.
So right now, the county's solution is a $7 million solution. Isn't that correct?
Well, that's if you do the amber lighting.
Right.
If you do the white lighting, the county will pay for all of it. But again, I don't even know that it's compliant with state regulations with respect to the turtles. So we don't want to have a situation where we all of a sudden end up with all this white lighting and then have to shut it off for 6 months during turtle season. So it's a challenge. I just don't think that report gave us enough choices. I think Florida Power and Light needs to think outside the box a little bit, see what other communities are doing. I can't imagine our county, Lee County,
is the only community that's faced this issue.
And Lee County is a coastal community, and I would think our county would be a little more sensitive to our situation here on the island.
I know, and I don't know what you guys have covered already, but I know there was one thing I was reading about the lights in the ground, like putting them down in as the construction is going in, and whether it was, I think it was amber lighting that they said, and that was one option that I think it was over in Fort Lauderdale, a coastal community over there did, and I was like, well,
let's take a look. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There have to be other communities that have solved this problem and done it in a smart way.
Yeah, there's a lot of shoreline in Florida.
Yes.
We cannot be the only community
it doesn't
here.
Seem like that study just looked at all those options. It doesn't look like they looked at other communities' experiences in a way that we could learn from those communities. And I think that's coming.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No.
No, we talked about the walkover. We talk about the walkover. You missed all that. You'll have to go back and listen to that
I will
one.
have to go back and listen.
Okay, so the other issue is, what is your position on how to resolve this situation at the foot of the bridge?
Well, again, I'm not going to give you a political answer here, but my position on that is I'm not the person to be throwing out my knee-jerk reaction to what should happen when you come over the bridge. We've got a public safety committee that's been studying this for months. The council and the county have been studying this for months. We've got traffic experts. We've got people with data, with real experience. And as I understand it, the mayor and the town are in conversations with the county, and we should be coming out, or they should be coming out shortly with a specific plan that we can all take a look at, see if it makes sense. So you know, I'm smart enough to know what I don't know, and I'm not a traffic expert. And there's a lot of people that have lived on this island on the north end that go across that bridge every day, know that area well. So I'm not going to impose my view. I'm going to listen to what smart people say on this, and particularly with the town coming out with this plan, with the county shortly. I think I'm just going to reserve judgment and take a look at it. Now, the council's done some smart things recently. They've increased the amount of folks and the time that for officers to be directing traffic. I think they're also trying to encourage the folks who do direct the traffic to do it to be trained properly, because it seems like there's times where the folks directing the traffic will literally stop all the traffic for one person crossing.
They've done that for us.
Let them gather. Let some folks gather. People don't mind waiting a couple minutes.
Right.
Let's just be smarter about it. But again, the big plan will be coming out shortly, and let's talk about that when it happens. But I'm not going to come out with my own knee-jerk plan and against all the experts that have been studying this for months.
Does the town of Fort Myers Beach need a public information officer?
Well, that's a great question, because I'm hoping you'll ask me about a couple other things which might help understand where a public information officer could be helpful. For example, if I may, one of my big issues is the water quality issue, in a little bit different perspective than what's been talked about before. The governor last year came out with a plan for a 4-year plan for $2.5 billion for water quality issues. Some of that's for Everglades restoration, for the water to flow naturally north-south again, like it had 100 years ago, and also for increasing the capacity of the reservoirs in Lake Okeechobee, so all that water doesn't come into our bay and cause red tide problems and blue-green algae problems, which it did in 2018. The water quality issue, to me, is the number one issue. It doesn't seem like it today because things are better.
Right.
But boy, in 2018, it was really, really scary and really grim. And that could easily happen anytime if we don't get busy. So again, last year, the governor asked for $625 million from the state legislature, actually got $682 million, plus asked for full matching funds for the Everglades space from the federal government. And just this past December got $200 million from the feds. That's the the second time in 20 years the Everglades funding has been fully funded by the feds. It was the most the feds have ever given Everglades funding. And I raise all this because that's great. And I think this year, because it's election year, national election year, I think we're likely to get similar focus on the water issue and the funding. But my worry is, I've worked in Washington, worked state government. Their attention span is very short.
Mm-hmm. And in a year.
And in a year from now, particularly if we have another calm summer, I'm worried about Washington. And even at the state level, there's a lot of competition for that $625 million that the governor's asking for. So what I'd like to start here is, from the town standpoint, is what I call the Snowbird Advocacy Army. I would love to see us do some ads in the local papers and on our website. The town of Fort Myers Beach wants you. Help protect our clean water. Here's how. And all the snowbirds, of course, this island swells to 50, 60,000 people from all over the country. So when these snowbirds come down here, we educate them on, they love the island. We educate them on the importance of the clean water. Then they go back home. We tell them how to write their member of Congress, their 2 U.S. senators. We tell them what bill specifically to ask your member in Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, whatever. Ask, and then write them that letter and your 2 senators, and explain them what you want them to do. Because members of Congress, they don't listen to what the Florida members of Congress, they listen to what their own constituents tell them. And this is a low-cost way to have a huge impact on public policy at the national level and even at the state level. Because in the summertime, we have a lot of Floridians who visit our island from around the state. And maybe in the summer, we have what we call our Floridian advocacy reservist group, and we educate all the Floridians who come down here to, when they go home, here's how you contact your state legislator, your state senator. And again, low cost way, high impact, because I'm telling you, I worked for a member of Congress for 16 years. If they get 5 or 10 letters from a constituent who live in their district that are genuine, they don't seem organized or computer driven, they look at their staff and they say, how can I help? And so I think if we did that nationwide, we would really help move this plan forward, because I'm telling you what, next year it's going to be harder to get the funding and harder to get the attention on the issue.
So does the town of Fort Myers Beach need a public information officer?
That's where I thought a public information officer could help. They could help coordinate this plan, and they could help, generate the earned media that's necessary, go on shows like yours. Obviously, the council would do that as well, as much as they can, and use that bully pulpit as best they can. So that's an area where the public information officer can help. Here's another area that you're going to ask me this question anyways, I'm sure, and you should. You're going to ask me about, what about code enforcement in the town? And I'm telling you what, I have to tell you, I was shocked as I've gone around, I've done a bunch of meet and greets. I'm meeting folks. To a person, I hear someone who's either been directly impacted or knows of somebody who's been fined, penalized, or ticketed in a way that they thought was overly aggressive by the town. So my thesis on this is that we should fine less, ticket less, penalize less, and we should give more warnings. We should do more education, and we should do more cooperation with our citizens. In Bonita Springs, I'm told that they issue a warning before they issue a fine, always. And in that warning, we need to explain why you're in violation, how you come in compliance, and work in cooperation with our town, because it seems like it's so adversarial. There's a climate of fear and frustration out there that I was really surprised to hear.
Where is it coming from?
It's coming from the town. And I don't blame necessarily code enforcement, because they're given direction by the town manager about how to enforce these codes. And the other thing that I ask questions about is, what's happening to all this money? Is the town now becoming dependent upon this revenue to fund our general government, to fund general fund revenue for the town? If that's the case, that's the wrong way to fund town government. Is code enforcement, is their success is employees measured on how many tickets they write, or is it measured on how many people you bring into compliance? I'd love our town enforcement to have the flexibility to say, hey, here's we're seeing this in your area. Could you see it? Well, give you a warning, explain how you come in compliance, have a cooperative tone as opposed to this adversarial tone. And that's where the public information officer could help too, because I think the town manager ought to every month write a letter to the editor for both papers and say, hey, here's what we're seeing. Here's where our fines are coming in. Here's where the penalties are coming in. Here's how you can avoid this. We don't want your money. We just want people to come in compliance and let people know exactly how they can avoid it, what they need to do, what the trends are. I'd love to see a big thermometer on our website that says how much we raised in fines and tickets in 2019, and then have one in 2020 and have it go down, as opposed to most of these for fundraisers, you want to see it go up. We would want this to go down. And that's where a PIO, I think, could help.
For sure.
Begin to communicate with our citizens in a way that I just don't think is happening.
So the other thing is about this rebranding company that the town has hired, RMA, for I think about 80,000 or no 60,000 or something.
60,
it was many thousands. Do you think that the town needed to spend 60,000 to rebrand Fort Myers Beach?
That's a great question. I think the proof will be in the pudding. What's I want to see the recommendations. I've listened a little bit from the rebranding folks. I went to an LPA meeting that talked a little bit about what they're doing, along with some of the redesigns for Times Square. And again, this is it's a tourist community. There is a lot of confusion between Fort Myers Beach and Fort Myers. But this rebranding concept, it seems like it's something that the business community ought to be heavily involved in, the chamber. And so, if they come up with something really clever that really helps clarify who we are and what we are as an island, I'll be impressed. But I don't know. I've not seen the end product yet, so I don't know.
Well,
yet.
They had the meeting at Bay Oaks a couple weeks ago, and 8 to 10 people showed up. And they had it in the middle of the day to 6 o'clock. I mean, I don't know how many people that have full-time jobs can actually go if they had an opinion on that. We've asked the lady to come on the show several times, but not that she needs to come on our show. Nobody watches our show, but she hasn't gotten back to us at all on that. Yeah. We've asked her 2 or 3 times, just so maybe that people can hear what the ideas are.
Right.
And they can always go back and watch the video later on.
What's the end result of doing that?
What's our goal?
What's the goal? What's the outcome? And what's the measure for if that is achieved and successful?
What's the metric for success? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that.
So the town passed a tax increase last year. Do you think that was a good idea? Would you be in favor of a tax increase if you were back then voting?
Yeah, we talked about this before. I would not have voted for the tax increase, but I don't criticize the council for what they were trying to accomplish. I just criticize the council in terms of how they did it. In other words, I think they were understandably trying to reserve for some big projects coming down the pike. Times Square renovation, beautiful. I've seen the plans for that. It's going to be spectacular. And it's okay to reserve those dollars and go ahead and do that. But I think they needed more specificity in that tax increase. In other words, they said, hey, we're increasing the mill rate X in order to cover these 3 projects. Here's how much they're going to cost. The reason why that's important is that after you then reserve the money, then, God forbid, something you rarely ever see, have the tax rate come back down again once you've done the reserving. So I think that was the fault there. Just more detail, more specificity. Only because when they're done, I commend them for reserving. I'm not a big fan of deficit spending and going into debt for these projects unless it's critical. So I just think it could have been done in a way that gave a little bit more clarity.
What do you think needs to be done with Bay Oaks?
I think the Bay Oaks could be whatever we want it to be as a community. I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but we need a community center. There is no place on the island where everyone can gather. I use Bay Oaks. We talked about the other day, they have a little weight room in there. I've talked to Tiffany at Hammerheads because I'm very sensitive to that issue. I don't think it's competitive with Tiffany because it's a different kind of a gym. But there are a ton of people that play pickleball there, a ton of people that that have social activities there. A lot of the kids use it as after school, an opportunity because of its proximity to the school. I think, exercise is so important, especially for older folks. I think we need to figure out what our mission is. We need to survey our population and figure out exactly what the desire is. Maybe a music venue as well, which can accommodate more people. I don't have all the answers for Bay Oaks, but I do think it could be a critical cog in our community in terms of how we function.
That might need some rebranding.
That may have been a better use for the $60,000. Yeah.
There you go.
If you had a chance to sit down with Bob Conadieris and Chris Patton, what would you say to them?
I would say, well, I'm not, who am I to lecture them, but I would say, look, we had a very transparent process went on, and there were 3 or 4 different iterations of it, and everybody had a chance to weigh in. The council voted who had disparate views on this going in. There were 3 leaning against, two leaning for. They all came together. Concessions were made on all sides. Let's move on together as a community. I think it's time, and I think, quite frankly, that those folks will see in the long term the benefits. And I think the whole island will benefit as a whole.
If you are you in favor of 3-year terms or 4-year terms? That's going to be let's talk about a public information officer. I'm not so sure, and I don't think the mayor feels like the community, or maybe it's Rexanne at the meeting. They don't
speak
know
for them.
They don't. I know they don't.
Please.
They're not so sure that the public is getting educated enough on what's about to happen with this referendum in the election, which is only a couple months away.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's a fair concern because I think there's a lot of information on both sides, and I don't feel terribly passionate about it one way or the other. I'm happy with the 3-year term or a 4-year term, doesn't matter. I do think the founders of our town were smart by instilling term limits, which I think helps offset any concerns or some concerns about the 3 to 4 years. Because if there were no term limits, I would think 4 years would be far too long, particularly if someone gets in there for term after term after term. So I think term limits helps mitigate the 3 to 4 year piece. I'm told too, and I don't know if this is true, but I'm told that it saves about $15,000 in tax dollars in terms of putting the elections together, and I've just heard a lot of different things, but you're right. I think more information on would be helpful. There's pros to, it's nice to have people here during an election when the season's at its peak. I'm also told that at the same time, there's, sometimes that traffic issue makes it hard for people to vote. I do think simplifying there's something to be said for simplifying the process by having it jive with our state and federal elections. And if there's cost savings involved, again, I'm happy to work under any scenario the voters feel strongly about. But it's not an issue I'm passionate about. But I think more information would be helpful.
One of the things that I've learned over the years coming down here is that there's a group of people that want it to remain a small beach, and there are other people that have the money and have the desire to keep it growing. And they're tearing at each other, and it gets ugly sometimes. What is the right mix for this beach? Well,
I think the right mix is to respect those folks who have been here for a long time. They have a lot of wisdom. They've given a lot to the island. But at the same time, again, I've not been here forever, so I have a kind of a fresher perspective. I do think you can do that in a way, and I think we saw that with the Margaritaville TPI process. They came out far too aggressive early, and they've downsized the project based upon input of the community, thoughtful conversations on both sides, back and forth. And again, I don't. That process took 3 or 4 years. I don't think we need to. No developer's going to wait 3 or 4 years to do that. This was kind of a unique situation. But I think it's a respect issue. I think those folks that are newer to the island who want change have to respect those folks. But at the same time, you still got to push forward. You got to have smart. It's not even development anymore. It's redevelopment.
Right.
And
Yeah,
we need
there's-
redevelopment, and we
right.
need smart redevelopment. And I think we should be open to it where it makes sense.
If you were not running for council, who would you vote for and why?
That's a great question.
That's 3 today.
Yeah, I know. You're really knocking it out of the park.
No, I mean, here's my philosophy of this, and I hope this doesn't sound too political, is that running for office is hard work, and it takes a lot of dedication. And I'm telling you what, anybody who's willing to have the courage of their convictions and step into what Teddy Roosevelt called the arena of the electoral process has my admiration and respect. So it's not my job to criticize the folks who are running here. That's the voters have an obligation, a civic duty, and it's their privilege to analyze those folks. And I hope they do so. But I'm not here to opine on that. I'll defer to the voters.
Should Trump be impeached?
I'll let the Senate handle that. But I think no. Yeah.
You think no? Yes.
I think no.
Okay.
I think no, yeah.
So there had to be one. Maybe not one, but if there was one specific reason you said, "Man, I need to run," what was it? What was the topic, or what was the something got under your skin, or some issue?
My wife and I live on the beach, and we run on the beach, we walk on the beach, we swim, we ride our bikes almost every day. And seeing that red tide disaster in 2018 was really, I mean, memories are short, but I'm telling you what, the economic impacts, the marine adverse impacts, and just for people who didn't even live on the beach, the smell, and we don't even know what the health issues are that resulted from that. And it's the blue-green algae. It was devastating. So people talk about traffic, they talk about parking, they talk about lighting. Those all become irrelevant if our water quality goes south again. And so we need to do something about it. And I think I've got an innovative idea that I think I can help with. But that's what helped really drive me. But for me, it's a broader calling to public service. Again, no specific agenda, not angry at anybody. And I want no drama professional government. We've had a lot of drama over the last few years. And I think it's time for a stable, no drama approach to government.
So in 60 seconds, tell anybody watching or listening why they should vote for you.
Well, I've talked a little bit about my experience and what I bring to the table. And my goal is to be able to hit the ground running. I've been on the LPA for a year and a half, so I don't know everything about the town, but I'm familiar with the local issues that impact the town. And I believe in public service in a way that I would be working for you, not the other way around. I think it's important for the public servant to understand who the boss is in that relationship, and I do, and I have a servant's heart, and I think it's a privilege to serve, and if given that privilege, I promise to work as hard as I can and do the very best job I can.
Any other questions?
No.
Jim, thanks so much for coming on short notice, kind of, but second time you've come on. We appreciate it very much, and
appreciate you guys raising these issues. Very helpful.
Good luck in the election, and we think you're going to get more votes than anybody.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you so much.
At least I do. I mean,
Bless
it's just we appreciate you coming on, and good luck.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
coming down and waiting.
so
We
much.
appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Jim Atterholt, everybody. Big hand. All right, everybody. Jim Atterholt running for town council, and we have candidates coming on every single weekend. And let me run down the candidate schedule.